Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good day. So today
Hi.
we are joining the webinar of Learn by the Nugget webinar series. Glad to have you all here. I'd like to know where you're all coming from. My name is Yobel. I'll be your moderator today, and I'm from Indonesia. So I'll do something like this on the chat box. Yobel, and then Indonesia. If you can do the same, it will be really great to know which region or countries you're coming from,
Yeah.
and it really help us to know what's your perspective, maybe your context. Oh, great, we have someone from Sweden. Hello there, and New Zealand as well. Cool. So while we are seeing people chatting where they're coming from, I'd like to describe a little bit about this webinar series. So this webinar is live on Facebook. So in case you have friends or colleagues who want to join this webinar, you can direct them to our Facebook account, Gaya Asia Pacific. But also we also live in Aotearoa Plastic Pollution Alliance, Wiantikepong Incinerator or KTI, and No Burn Filipinas. And while waiting for more people to jump into this webinar, I'd like to share a few things about this Learn by the Nugget. So this series is featuring work from our members in Gaia and discussion on new reports by Gaia Secretariat or members and discussion of the Gaia Asia Pacific campaigns. It is also following the demands from members, and the time of this webinar is designed to be convenient for most countries in Asia Pacific region. So again, welcome for people in Zoom and also on Facebook. This is the ninth series of the Gaia Asia Pacific Learn by the Nugget series. My name is Yobel Novian Putra, or people call me Yobel. I'm your moderator for this webinar. I work with Gaia Asia Pacific as Climate and Clean Energy Campaign Associate, working mostly on anti-incineration campaigns. And I'm based in Bandung, Indonesia. Before going further, I'd like to give a short introduction of Gaia. Gaia stands for the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives. And this is a global alliance of over 800 organizations in over 90 countries that has been working for a just, waste-free world for nearly 20 years strong now. And today's topic is one of the many topics that excites me personally. It is fighting incinerator across Asia Pacific. As our waste problem grows exponentially throughout the region, and Asia is being labeled as the main source of global waste leakage, waste incineration facilities are promoted as a solution in many countries. As we know, burning waste doesn't eliminate the problem. Waste incinerator facilities only brew one waste problem into a lot of problems, which in the process produce toxic cocktails that harm both our health and the environment. Nonetheless, with countries hard hit by health and economic crisis, waste incineration fights are growing stronger than ever. So in this webinar, we will learn how this fight from three countries in Asia Pacific look like and take the lesson learned from these three different perspectives. We'll be looking at the fight in the Philippines, where they are defending the only waste incineration ban in the region. Also, we will hear from Malaysia about the ongoing fights to stop dozens of mega incinerator projects pushed by the government, and learn more from New Zealand, where communities are giving strong opposition to waste to energy incinerator projects pushed by the incinerator industry. We will also have a glimpse of the regional and global context that I will be delivering on waste incineration. We are recording this live, so for members, this recording will be shared via email after the webinar, but we will also make this recording available on Gaia website, Facebook Live, and our YouTube channels. This webinar will last 1.5 hours, and first we will hear from all the speakers, then we will move to the Q&A answer, a Q&A session. So please use the Q&A section on your screen in Zoom and not the chat box. Again, not the chat box. Or you can also comment in Facebook Live to send questions to the speakers. Questions can be posted on the Gaia specific comment section even after the webinar ends. So you can also post it on Aotearoa Plastic Pollution Alliance, Anti-Kapong Incinerator or KTI, and No Burn Filipinas Facebook account. To make efficient use of time, we will mute participants in Zoom and tag questions through the Q&A section. If you experience technical issues in Zoom, please contact to our technical support team through the chat box. There is Miko here who will help us with technical support. And also there is Sonia and Tris of GAAP who will help if you need things done. So before learning from the nuggets, I will share a short regional and global context of anti-incineration work. Tris, Sonia, can you please move to the slide? To the next one. Okay. Shortly, we can see here a map. This is a map that is made by UNAC. And as you can see, it shows us number of incinerator plants in all regions. So we can see the first thing first is that Asia Pacific has over 1,000 plus plants recorded by UNSD, OECD, and the World Bank. And it has the biggest pie compared to the other regions. Right after that is Europe, with half of the number of incinerator plants in Asia Pacific. This might be strange for some of us at the first glance, because we know that the government of the global South countries look up to Europe in regards of thermal waste to energy technology. We will see why this is the case in the next slides. But we can also see that the US has even less incineration plant. So let's start with the US. Next. So in the next slide, okay. In the US, waste incineration had huge opposition from local communities since the 80s. In fact, over 300 waste incinerators were stopped by local communities due to the harm it produced, especially on human health and the environment. Only one incinerator built in US since 1997. As this incinerator got closer to the end of their last lifespan, their contract with cities are set to expire. So cities now have opportunity to break loose from these dinosaur facilities and transition to a sustainable future that focuses on waste reduction instead of burning it. Although there are still 70 to 80 incinerators remain in operation, but most likely we will see them close, because since early 2000, the industry has saw at least 31 municipal solid waste incinerator close due to a lot of reasons. But most notably are the inability to upgrade their plants in accordance with the required environmental standard. So next we will see from Europe. This is, as for the EU, we know that government in Asia Pacific often refer to their technology as the best in the world. But that's not really the case. Notice that not all European countries in the graph use waste incineration. Only the rich and industrialized country invest in incineration. Mostly they are in the northern part of Europe, like Germany, France, the Netherlands, the Nordic countries. You can tell by looking at the green line bars. These countries have built so many incinerator plants that they have problem with overcapacity. That means they need to import waste from their neighboring countries to keep the machines running. In fact, these countries are the same countries that promote and sell their problematic burning technologies to the global South. The question is, why do they do that? So in the next slide, we can see that the fair reason is because Europe has started to move away from waste incineration. Since 1998, there was greater ambition for Europe to achieve the circular economy. Therefore, Europe has made progressive legislation that hinders incineration facilities. One of those is the Renewable Energy Directive that basically states that burning mixed waste should not be considered as renewable energy. And thermal WTE facilities should not be subsidized unless they meet the separate collection target. And the other big thing that happened last year was the EU Sustainable Finance Taxonomy Report, which create a list of activities that are classified as sustainable and not sustainable. Waste incineration falls to the non-sustainable practices. That's the good news. And it's excluded because it may harm one of the key environment objectives, That is to ensure the transition to circular economy, waste prevention, recycling, and also to achieve our climate target. The last one comes from EIB, or European Investment Bank, which just released its circular economy guide that excludes waste incineration as contributor to circular economy. So knowing that, in the next slide, due to that reasons, incinerator companies and some government from Europe and USA sell their technology to the global south, mostly disguised by the name of waste to energy technology and not incinerator. The reason are there are less market for incinerator now in US and Europe. We've seen a lot of overcapacity, a lot of companies that cannot meet the standards. So with those numbers of problem, they're moving towards a place or countries with less progressive legislation. And companies are looking for countries with weaker legislation, but the same problem of waste. So for some government, they offer loan or project to these countries in the global south to gain profit, while in reality, these incinerators are not really working in their own countries. They are declining. So that's roughly a global context of what's happening in it for incinerator. In the next slide, we'll see what happened in Asia Pacific. So here you can see, although the region has the most number of waste incineration plants, 3/4 of it comes from these three countries: Japan, mainland China, and South Korea. Also, we have one country that has the biggest incinerators in terms of capacity, which is Singapore. So let's see how these countries are doing with their waste burning. In the next slide, you can see here, Japan has been using incinerator, and even before the 80s. But in the 2000, in order to move away from the current linear economic system, Japan enacted what they call the Basic Act of Establishing a Sound Material Cycle Society, or basically it's a Basic Recycling Act in 2000. This, along with other legislation on a more stringent air pollution standards, lead to the phase out of incinerators, especially the small ones, and going slowly towards more recycling and more reduced effort. Although the reduced effort are not really fantastic at this point, this trend really shows that waste incineration is not seen as part of sustainable solutions. Next, please. And now we look at China, the mainland China. The most notable thing is that China invests in a lot of new incinerator facilities in less than 10 years. A recent study recorded that 231 incinerators are operating and 103 more are in the pipelines. Yet, most of these incinerators are made by one company, Everbright. This company also exports incinerator to other countries such as Vietnam, and plan to expand to other countries such as Indonesia, India, and Malaysia. So this is part of the China's Belt and Road Initiative. Next slide. Yet the same study shows that in short term, there will be overcapacity problem with this many number of waste incinerator, similar to what we see in Europe and US. This is even true without sorting of food waste and increased focus on removing recyclable waste from the mixed waste stream. So once the recycling and segregation goes up, this incineration will have even more problems to keep the flame up and going. And the next slide, we'll see how the South Korea. There is some tables there. So in the table, you can see that in Seoul, South Korea, we also see similar trend. South Korea has at least two progressive legislation on waste. The first one called the volume-based waste disposal fee system, which basically you have to pay based on the amount of the waste you throw, and volume waste utilization program. So after segregation of food waste applied, the total amount of municipal solid waste disposed is decreased around 40%. This is said by the Ministry of Environment in 2015. And the compostable waste collected from was significantly reduced. The rate of recycling plus composting nearly tripled from 4.1 million ton to which is around 24% in 1995 into 10.5 million ton in 2015. However, this number has dropped since 2009, where the total recycling and composting were about 61%. And the WTE has increased to 20%. So this creates some kind of problem. As you can see on the table, there are overcapacity problem. By the percentage, you can tell that they're competing for feedstock. We can see it more clearly in the next slide. So next slide, please. So here is a graph that shows when the incinerator was applied. You can see there are lock-in effects happening. So the lock-in effects are actually disable or hinders the reduction and recycle rate, so it cannot go further because it competes for the same feedstock. Because incineration needs this dry waste and high calorific content, mostly plastic or cardboard, which are also recyclable. So this is also the same thing that we have seen in Europe, mainland China, and Japan. So in the next, we can see what other problem that we can see in Singapore. As for Singapore, they have no landfill to dump their waste. So since 1979, they built one incinerator to reduce volume of their waste, but still they need somewhere to store the ash. And they keep this toxic ash in an engineered sea fuel called Macau Island. After years, the sea fuel are going run out of space. They call it a time bomb because the waste generation are going higher and higher, yet the incinerator capacity are not really cannot really catch up with the waste generation. This is a strong example that incineration doesn't eliminate the need for landfill. In fact, the Singapore National Environment Agency stated that incinerator alone cannot deal with the ever-increasing amount of waste, and we cannot keep building more incineration plants indefinitely. This is similar to Japan. Although they still use incinerator, they acknowledge that they need to invest much more time and energy to prevent recycling and reduction efforts. Last year, Singapore government launched a campaign called Towards Zero Waste Singapore. Basically, they want to significantly improve the efforts on reducing consumption of materials, reusing, and recycling. So this is a general condition of the big countries that adopt incinerator globally and regionally. And now we will hear from our speakers. So without further ado, now we will listen to what happened in New Zealand. Here is our first speaker today. Our first speaker, Marty Hoffert, represents Aotearoa Plastic Pollution Alliance in New Zealand. He's also the director of Waste Watcher Limited, chairman of Zero Waste Network, chairman of Environmental Education for Resource Sustainability Trust, chairman for Keep Tauranga Beautiful, co-chair of New Zealand Product Stewardship Council, committee member of E-Waste Watch Australia. Marty straddles diverse sectors of the resource recovery industry through his experience in the commercial, community, and the education sector. Aside from being the director of Waste Minimization Consultancy, Waste Watcher Limited, he is also a champion of the non-for-profit and social enterprise sector as chairman of the Zero Waste Network. He credits a Canadian upbringing with sparking his ongoing advocacy for product stewardships, zero waste, and producer responsibility. Along with a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology and Psychology, he holds 3 industry-specific New Zealand Qualification Authority qualifications in zero waste, resource recovery, and resource efficiency. So Marty, please take it away.
Thank you, Yobo. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and good evening, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today to represent APA, the Aotearoa Plastic Pollution Alliance. And for those of you that don't know, Aotearoa is the Maori name for New Zealand. So when you hear Aotearoa Plastic Pollution Alliance, you can think of the New Zealand Plastic Pollution Alliance. So the first slide up is regeneration, not incineration. And This is a campaign that we launched in the last couple of years, last year, as a part of to oppose mixed municipal waste incinerators. The campaign was led by the Zero Waste Network and includes APA, the Aotearoa Plastic Pollution Alliance, another organization called The Rubbish Trip, and these all have websites if you want to look at them. Perakore. Now, Perakore means zero waste in Te Reo Maori. So Perakore is our local indigenous organization working towards zero waste with Maori organizations. And another organization titled Westland, Not Wasteland. It started in 2018 as a response to a proposal on the west coast of the South Island to build a waste to energy facility. So New Zealand currently does not have any waste to energy facilities. The Aotearoa Plastic Pollution Alliance principle or policy, also called kaupapa in Maori, is to prevent plastic pollution in New Zealand and Oceania as part of it's an integral part of restoring Papatuanuku, which is Mother Earth, and Tongaroa, which is the god of the sea. Community groups throughout New Zealand, led by the Zero Waste Network, launched the national campaign that highlights the dangers of waste to energy incinerators. The centerpiece of the campaign is a petition that was sent to the Minister for the Environment requesting that he intervene and decline all new applications for incinerators in New Zealand. We know that waste to energy companies are looking to sell their technology in New Zealand as markets elsewhere dry up. Now is the time for a national approach on the issue to make it clear that we don't want our current landfills full of hazardous incinerator ash being dumped all around the country. New Zealanders want to work towards a zero waste future, not a toxic waste landscape. The campaign was initiated in response to increasing interest by international incineration corporate companies that want to set up shop in New Zealand. At present, the group of organizations that I listed are aware of 2 proposals that are under consideration. Just to give you a bit of lay of the land, New Zealand has 63 councils or 63 local authorities. So you'd be familiar with Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch being our 3 largest cities. So we have 63 councils in New Zealand. In one area of the West Coast, a small town called Hokitika, and another town in the North Island called Huntly were both being proposed as good sites by waste incineration companies. The Huntly's in a good location because it is near Auckland, and Auckland currently has about 40% of New Zealand's population. Just recently, the government in the last few years conducted a national waste levy review that showed that New Zealanders are producing significantly more waste than they did a decade ago. Furthermore, communities and local councils around the country are grappling with stockpiles of recycling that have resulted from restricted international markets for plastics, soft plastics, and contaminated paper and cardboard. Many people think that incineration is the answer to the recycling problem. We believe that the answer to these problems is not burning rubbish. Rather, we need to phase out these types of materials that we can't recycle by introducing mandatory product stewardship schemes like those being considered by government. We need to commit to real recycling that supports local councils to move towards a circular economy, not incineration. And hence the tagline, regeneration, not incineration. Governments and businesses across the globe are increasingly endorsing the concept of a circular economy, which aims to replace the old linear take, make, and waste approach to production with a new paradigm that designs waste out. This new system would copy the way nature does things with the aim of keeping biological and non-biological resources circulating in the economy endlessly through cycles. We believe that waste to energy incinerators are a dinosaur technology that locks the linear system in place by creating an incentive to keep wasting and keep producing plastic packaging and other packaging that is problematic. You can go to my next slide now, Yobel. So waste to energy, the industry push in Aotearoa. The one proposal, as I mentioned, was in Huntley to investigate, and it was at the investigative stage only. Other proposals have been defeated by community opposition. And Yobel, you pointed out quite well how community opposition in the United States was incredibly strong to stop a massive push to have waste to energy plants installed. Approaches by waste energy companies to iwi, Maori, and local government. And there is political support on the right for waste to energy, which is unfortunate. So far, the efforts of the community have been quite successful, as there's nothing currently in the press of a waste to energy plant being built. I'll go on to the next slide now. Communities unite against waste to energy. And once again, never underestimate the power of what community groups can do to fight waste to energy and incineration. The campaign was led by communities on the front lines, and most specifically the west coast of the South Island, by Westland, not Wasteland. And it has been extremely successful in mobilizing community opposition to waste to energy. Town hall meetings are an extremely successful way to mobilize communities to engage in the concept of understanding what waste to energy means. Other campaign tools is we had a national petition opposing waste to energy. We created a PowerPoint available to local councils. We wrote articles, published them in the local government magazine, and taking steps to work with all other sectors of society. And I'll just go on to my last slide now, Yobel. Some of the regional recommendations and a call to action. So New Zealand is a Pacific nation in the South Pacific, and we are keeping a close eye on our neighbors in the Pacific. While there's growing resistance to incineration in the Pacific, some countries still see it as the only way to go in the absence of alternative waste management options. We all know that recycling is in a tough situation at the moment. It's been a real problem with some recycling programs going backwards, as in plastic is a problem to recycle for New Zealanders, because at the moment we don't have a lot of onshore capacity for the recycling industry, and it was an export product. And unfortunately, no one wants to see shipping containers being sent back from Thailand or Indonesia or anywhere back to New Zealand full of contaminated recyclable material. So at the moment, it plays right into the hands of the incineration companies. So just to finish off, you know, although there are there is a big push on at the moment by some of the waste incinerator companies. To date, we have been quite successful in pushing back against waste incineration companies. And you know, although we are a Pacific nation, probably New Zealand isn't doing enough in the South Pacific to be vocal and have policy to work with our Pacific neighbors. So it's probably something that our government could do more of, and our organization could do more of, is to work more closely with our Pacific neighbors. And I'll just finish off there, Yobel. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. Thank you for your fabulous presentation. Well, I always love to see the energy that local grassroots communities spark on the fight for our better future. I mean, we will gather all the questions later, Marty, but I would like to hear more from the audience. Maybe the participants can have questions. You can post it on the Q&A chat box there. Okay, so now to talk the incineration fight in Malaysia, allow me to introduce our second speaker. So our second speaker is Lee Chongte, or called Mr. Lee. He has been in the machinery and parts business for more than 30 years. He's actively involved in NGOs and various associations in Kuala Lumpur. Lee is currently the Director General of the Federation Moral Uplifting Association Malaysia, Deputy Chairman of Kuala Lumpur and Selangor Cehuan Core Moral Uplifting Society, Chairman of Persatuan and Pendidikan 3R Kuala Lumpur, Committee Member of Selangor and FT Engineering and Motor Parts Traders Association. He's also the Chairman of Gabungan Anti-Incinerator Kebangsaan, or GAIK, in Malaysia. Lee graduated from his Master of Business Administration from the University of Sunshine Coast, Australia in 2005. And Mr. Lee, the stage is yours.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is Lee from Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur. I'm representing GAIK, that is Gabungan Anti-Incinerator Kebangsaan Malaysia. This is in English, is my second slide, please. This is our setup is on the 2014, July 6, 2014, July the 16th. A few Malaysian NGOs announced establishing GAIK Bukit Payong Declaration. There was the Johor going to build out an incinerator proposed site at Bukit Payong near to Batu Pahat, Johor. So our people went down, and then a lot of these activists grouped together, and then we have these Bukit Payong declarations. The Bukit Payong declarations urges the Malaysian government to put on hold on all the proposal of building new incinerators. Because we actually want the government to go on with the 3R, which is environment friendly towards the green and healthy environment. But looking at it, the Malaysian government doesn't listen to the people. Yeah. The third one is the declarations represent that founding NGOs will strive to rally and support across the country to promote zero waste management and to abolish incinerator. On this, we are working hard as activists. We want the government to work with us, but then government, they have their own agenda. They want a solution which is quick and fast, because during their tenure of 5 years, they want to build something which is can be seen by the people. So maybe to them, they say this process, this 3R process is very slow. This zero waste management is very hard for the what do you call it, B40 and below. They won't listen to you and so on. A lot of nonsense. The fourth one, the founding NGOs members from Kuala Lumpur Reject Incinerators Action Committee, KTI, Save Bukit Payong, Cameron Highlands Anti-Incinerator Alliance, and Tanah Merah Anti-Incinerators Committee. And then later on, we have a few add-ons like Penang Consumer Associations and the rest of the NGOs. Governments, they are having different sets of mindset from the normal people. You see, this Pakatan Harapan government, the ministries of local and housing ministers, during their public announcements on last year, they said they are going to build 13 mega incinerators across Malaysia, which every state will have at least 1 mega incinerators. To them, they said this our waste management is substandard. They are going to do something which is quick and fast, so that to prevent the increased capacity of the waste. Currently, the Malaysian governments are building 4 mega incinerators, namely Jeram in Selangor, Sungai Udang in Melaka, Bukit Pelanduk, the site is at Ladang Tanah Merah, Negeri Sembilan, and the Bukit Payong in Johor. In fact, more incinerators will be launched in the near future. The 13 mega incinerators which mentioned by the ministers, I look at it, they shouldn't push it up so quickly. Because for the past, we have 4 to 5 small capacity incinerators which are all failures. Because we fought along the way, we found out in Pulau Tioman, Cameron Highland, a few of them, they are, another one in Pulau Langkawi. We went to the site and do investigations. They are all failures. Now they are going to joint ventures with the foreign investors. For example, the one in Jeram, this is Selangor state government's joint ventures with the China. There's a China Western Power. It's a joint ventures project in Jeram, and then the phase 1 project costs 500 million ringgit, and then the phase 2 project will cost another 500 million. That total will be 1 billion. The capacity in Jeram will be 1,200 per day. For the one in Melaka and Bukit Pelanduk, Negeri Sembilan, that will be smaller. The Negeri Sembilan one is 600 ton per day, and then the one in Sungai Udang will be 800 ton per day. In fact, more incinerators will be launched in near futures. At what our ministers, Budos too, they said they're going to build every one in one of the cities in Malaysia. So we are worried about this. In fact, we try to convince the government not to build so many incinerators in one time. Maybe you do it slowly and see what are the impacts, what are the defaults, what are the handicaps where you people may find out later when we look back the history, those in European country and even in America, you have only one so far the incinerator built over the countries. If it's a good thing, why not they build as much as possible in their own country? Yeah. Okay, my next slide please. Positions of political parties. Federal ruling parties are hardcore proponents of incinerators. Okay, you can see earlier when it was Barisan Nationals ruling the countries, they tried to bring in these incinerators. That time, Pakatan Harapan, the under opposition party. But later on, it was 2 years back, Pakatan Harapan managed to took over the power. But then after they took over power, they have forgotten their manifesto. They tried to come back to these monsters where they agreed to sign this MOU with the China consortium to build out the Jeram incinerators. And the earlier arrangement was, they said they will do something like very transparency, following their manifestos. Everything will be open tender and so on. But at the end of the day, the one at Jeram is a direct negotiations. This is the triple P, the private is a private arrangement. After negotiations, they were just awarded the projects. Yeah. There's some things are opposing what they have agreed earlier. The second point is that federal opposition parties are marked opponents of incinerators, except some small opposition parties. For instance, in Penang, they have did their recycling project waste separating segregations very well. They score about 43% in the year 2017, where national level is about 21%. But later, they were influenced by their counterparts. You see, in Selangor, they are the same Harapan, Pakatan Harapan government, where they are the counterparts together. They try to influence, they already influenced by their counterparts. So in fact, they are looked into the setup of these monsters. I do not know why with their such a high rate of this recycling rate, 40%, which is the top score in Malaysia. They are still look into this, but they are yet to come into final. In other words, in Malaysia, anti-incinerator campaigns still faced with a lot of challenges. My presentation, I think, so far is this much I can share. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lee, for sharing your experience.
Yeah.
I believe this gives more sense of how different FIACs look in different countries, because you mentioned there is some strong opposition from the federal government, and also there's a lot of mega projects rolling or in the pipeline. So I hope we will see a more definitive win over this problematic incinerator in the future in Malaysia.
Yeah.
So now, last but not least, we will hear from the Philippines. Let me introduce our third speaker. Glenn Yamata is a climate, justice, and energy campaigner for the past 7 years. He is the campaigner of Northern Pilipinas and the anti-incineration program lead of Eco Waste Coalition. He was the senior energy transition officer of the Philippine Movement for Climate Justice, who spearheaded the lawsuit against the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, and also the Department of Energy. And the first climate change lawsuit in the International Finance Corporation, World Bank Group, due to the proliferation of coal plants in the Philippines. He also served as the Secretariat Head of Southeast Asia Fish for Justice Network from 2008 to 2010. Glenn also worked in the public sector as Chief of Staff of Edsel Lackman Jr. from 2010 to 2016, advisor on energy and climate for former DENR Secretary Gina Lopez, and did consulting for the Department of Interior and Local Government and a number of local government units. Glenn earned his bachelor degree in community development and master degree in public administration at the University of Philippines. He specializes in public policy and program development and management. He's yet to finish his dissertation for his Doctor of Philosophy on Public Administration. So Glenn, we are excited to hear from your story. The time is yours.
Thank you, Yuvel, for the nice introduction. I'd like to share to you our fight against incineration here in the Philippines. To start off, I'd like to introduce Northern Pilipinas. Northern Pilipinas is the campaign platform, which is an offshoot of the anti-WTE campaign of the Eco Waste Coalition back in 2017. During that time, there were 53 organizations, mostly members also of Eco Waste Coalition, doing zero waste work in various areas here in the Philippines, plus other organizations. Now we have 78 organizations, and we can consider it as a grassroots campaign organization fighting incineration here in the Philippines. So Here's a bit of context of our struggle here in the Philippines. As earlier mentioned, the Philippines is one of the countries in the region that bans incineration. We have two laws, that's Ecological Solid Waste Management Act and Clean Air Act, that prohibits incineration of waste. But even with that, there has been a number of proposals for WTE projects here in the Philippines ever since these laws were enacted back in 2000. So right now, based on our monitoring, there are already 23 proposed WTE projects here in the Philippines with a combined estimated capacity of 300 megawatts and projected to treat or use feedstock of 15,000 tons of waste per day. So you can see on the map of the Philippines how this proposed project, once operational, are spread throughout the Philippines. And most of these projects are actually technologies from Australia, Japan, US, Denmark, China, British, and even Germany. So those mentioned by Yubel a while ago that the North and developing countries which have been veering away from these technologies are now peddling this business here in the global South. And unfortunately, Philippines is one of those. So Northern Pilipinas, since its inception and campaign, has been engaging in many fronts. All these have been actually proponents of waste incineration here in our country. So we are engaging our legislative branch, which is the Senate of the Philippines and the House of the Representatives. We have a bicameral legislature here. And also we are engaging the executive branch of the government, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, which is the main agency mandated by law to look into waste management here in the country, and as well as the local government units. These are like states, no? In United States. So we have local government units also mandated by the national laws on solid waste management. So that's why proposals for WTs are being negotiated with these local government units. We have been also engaging the Asian Development Bank, who is actually facilitating the negotiations and has expressed financing or providing support in order to establish this waste to energy project here in the Philippines. We have also some engagement with private corporations who have made commitment to set up WTEs here in the Philippines. So now we are at the crossroad of whether or not our country or our government will allow the use or the adoption of waste to energy here in the Philippines. And since it is explicitly banned or prohibited in our laws, there have been a number of other ways of proposing these types of technologies in the guise of other kind of technologies they have been using, because incineration is like a taboo word here. So they have been introducing this new name of technologies such as pyrolysis, gasification, and plasma arc, and so forth and so on, just to hide the evil things about incineration. So the main tactics right now of the WT proponents is to amend the law that prohibits incineration and enact one that will allow waste incineration here in the country. And at the current Congress, the 18th Congress of the Philippines, have existing bills filed both at the upper house and the lower house of our legislature. So these are just major salient points of the bills being proposed right now, currently being deliberated. If passed, it will allow all types of technology. It will consider WTS as a renewable energy resource just to obtain incentives for renewable energy as provided also by our law. It also provides for clustering of local government units meaning because this is a big investment and this capital intensive, and one local government unit may find it difficult to finance or operate it. So that is why they are providing for a mechanism that would allow LGUs to cluster among themselves. And also it provides for providing sovereign guarantee, which is also part of the contractual obligation the meet by the local government units. Also the framework for determining tipping fees or processing fee, which they are calling it right now. And this is the main revenue part. So as to ensure also the business side of the waste incineration here. Of course, the incentives and subsidies that need to be provided. And if instance, there will be shortage in feedstock, it may allow waste importation from other countries. So with that context, what we have been doing until now. So because the major element of our struggle now is at the policy level. So we are focusing much of our effort in countering, you know, or blocking the passage of the bills filed at the Congress. So we have been participating in the public hearings, both at the Senate and the lower house. We were also able to put forward our oppositions and comments to the provisions or specific provisions of the proposed law during the technical working group meetings. And right now, we can consider it in the advanced stage of policy making here in the Philippines, because it has been submitted for second reading, meaning there's already a committee report that has been approved, and that all bills or similar bills were consolidated to come up with a single bill that will be deliberated by both the Senate and the House of Representatives. So we have yet to monitor and follow the developments at the Senate and at the House of Representatives. We also feel the need to broaden the constituency. You know, the communities, the organizations, the network that have been that will campaign, you know, against this proposal for WTs here in the Philippines. So aside from the Northern Pilipinas, which is the main coalition or alliance fighting against incineration, we were able to tap and unify other big networks here in the Philippines. They are mostly environment and climate justice and energy networks here in the Philippines. And we do that by way of giving them updates, briefing, orienting them in the issue of waste to energy. And good thing is that they were able to embrace this campaign, and now they are initiating their own initiatives on how to campaign against waste incineration here in the country. Aside from that, we also see the need to rally or mobilize the general public, and with the end view of creating a public outrage. So we are also providing briefing sessions with other networks with many members or public, and we have been inviting expert, not just here or local expert, but also we are tapping expert from international network and allies. And we do that because of the COVID restrictions. We do that mostly now via online. We are also lobbying, you know, specifically to the legislators. Now we have underwent a series of dialogues with ally senators who may or committed to interpolate, meaning challenge the policy proposals being put forwarded in the Senate, so that eventually, and we are hoping that the Senate might not pass it during this Congress. And also at the lower house, we have been um, keeping or doing a dialogue or meeting some legislators in order to challenge the proponents of the bills. If we are not in the quarantine situation, we might be out of the streets doing these popular mobilizations. In the past month before the COVID, we have been very vocal and vivid in terms of expressing our oppositions to the moves of the government, whether the Congress or the executive branches. And now we are forced to come up with creative actions, and we have to do it online because of the COVID. And I think that is one downside of the or challenges of the campaign right now, because it's very difficult for us, to engage, our government and our policymakers, to be able for them to realize and understand where we are coming from. So to complement that, we need to do this digital protest and online actions. So we have been developing digital content that we can share online in social media platform, not just for the Northern Pilipinas, but we are also sharing it to the social media platform of other networks that we have or that we were able to convince to campaign against waste to energy. And some of which are also online protests that can be done even within the community, just to convey our outburst or rejection or opposition to the moves of our government. So what other forms of engagement that we have been doing is to, shift the mindset or the narratives that these proponents of WTs have been propagating, that incinerators or WTs now are much safe and because of the advancement in technology. So we need also to challenge those narratives and do some communications work. So we were able to penetrate the media, although it's not that easy, but we have every once in a while have results, produce results in order to share our narrative with the traditional media. So with that, I hope that you can also share and support us, even if you are not here in the Philippines, by signing on the petition to scrap the WTE here in the Philippines. You just go to the site indicated there, and hopefully you sign on the petition by leaving your name, your organizations, and that's it. So thank you for the opportunity, and I'd be glad to answer if you have questions. Back to you, Yubel.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. Well, thank you to all the speakers. We can learn a lot, I believe, from their presentation. But now let's move to the Q&A session. I see there is one question directed to Marty. So it's from Swan. Swan is from Vietnam Zero Waste Alliance. So Marty, she says, thank you for your effort and presentation. Would you please share with us the reply or the response of government or ministry when you propose them not to accept WTE incinerators? So Marty, please, your answer on it.
Thanks, Yobel. So we haven't got an official reply because the government is actually not in favor, in our view, of waste incinerators anyway. So we have no policy that they're totally opposed to waste incinerators, but it doesn't follow current government policy to increase recycling rates, increase product stewardship, and mandatory, regulation for certain products. So it's not, yeah, we don't have an official government reply to our petition, but the mood of the government is not in favor of building waste incinerators. Let's put it that way.
Thank you, Marty. And there's another one for, I'm sorry if I spelled it or pronounce it wrong, Marjorie. Um, Hello, I'm just wondering, is there any incineration facility already built in the Philippines? Since we are an agricultural country, I believe we built one to properly dispose agricultural pesticides, plastic, and bottles. Wow. And now what I'm curious is, why do small cities like Dumaguete City in Negros Oriental plan to propose a WT incinerator? Is this really necessary? Do they consult with a professional? I think this is a question best directed to Glenn. Glenn, you want to respond?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for the questions. So right now, we don't have a waste to energy incineration. Just the like we are witnessing in other countries. No, what we do have right now are biomass technology, and we are suspecting that these biomass facilities are mixing solid waste because they find it, you know, cheaper, and there are ways, no, uh, to be used, so they can mix it with agricultural waste in these facilities. But we have to confirm that, and also there are other forms of waste incineration here in the countries, but not in the context of producing electricity, no, that will send to the grid, but through industrial processes like cement manufacturing. They are co-processing municipal solid waste with coal and other fossil fuel types, also to get cheaper feedstock for their industrial furnaces. And finally, with the surmounting number or volume of healthcare waste, and with the issuance of Department of Environment and Natural Resources, a memorandum circular on handling healthcare waste, I think there are now transport, storage, and disposal facilities that is using pyrolyzing or incinerating technologies to dispose of these types of healthcare waste. So it's very difficult for us, and it's quite challenging to get information because we are at the mercy of these regulatory agencies like the Environmental Management Bureau of the DENR, and this is why we are empowering our community partners and allies so that they themselves can investigate, you know, what's been happening in these facilities. In Dumaguete, before, yes, we heard that there was a proposal, and I think it's currently being negotiated with the local government of Dumaguete. And this is where what Yobel mentioned, that proponents or peddlers of WTEs are looking for weak government, no, where they can easily convince them to adopt this kind of technology. So I think that's one. No? They are finding local governments that can be easily convinced or swayed to adopt the use of this kind of technology.
Maybe I would like to clarify one point. You mentioned the technology are more on biomass. Do they consider plastic as biomass as well? Because I see some countries or some companies make that statement that plastic is also biomass, so you can make it into fuel in form of usually briquettes or solid fuel. Is that the case in the Philippines?
The provision now, what being proposed in the bills that I've mentioned, is that they are considering all types of waste as a renewable energy resource. So that means if this law is passed, then even plastic can be considered as a type of renewable energy resource. but even without that law, there was this policy issuance from the Department of Energy that even if it's biomass facility, as long as you maintain the percentage of mix of municipal solid waste, then that's still considered as biomass facility. So it's kind of weird, crazy, you know. So
Yeah. I mean, I have crazy things in Indonesia as well. A conflicting issue of policy between the energy sector and the environment sector. It's the same here in Indonesia. I can tell that the government pushed for refuse derived fuel, RDF, which is basically a solid fuel by drying up the waste. And they have another regulation that says, okay, it's okay to burn waste if you fulfill this ABC requirement from another regulation, which is not under the Ministry of Environment. So yeah, thank you, Glenn, for clarifying. Do you want to add anything else?
no.
Okay, great. So I hope that answers Marjorie's questions. Glenn, there is another one from Suan. I think there's a lot of questions for Philippines. So from Suan, Mr. Glenn, no, Burn Filipinas had 50 members at the beginning and now 78 members. How can you achieve that? Who are they? I mean, how many NGOs, or are there any government organizations? Your answer, Glenn?
Yeah, what we've done last year is we had this series of campaign conference. It's for the members of Northern Pilipinas in a particular region, but we extended the invitation to other organizations so that they may be able to understand or witness what we are fighting for, and what the issues we are engaging, and what are the experiences of the members. So with that, at the end of those series of conferences, we asked them if they would like to be involved in our campaign. So that usual process. And even now, you doing that online, we also encourage other organizations to be part, no? Whether formally as a member of Northern Pilipinas, or via coordination, meaning they maintain their network, they do their campaign in coordination with Northern Pilipinas. So it's just a continuing conversation with different organizations with respect to issues on waste incineration.
Thank you, Glenn. I see there is a question from Miriam Azurian, Maya. I think this is a good question for Mr. Lee to answer, and also maybe Glenn. So the question is for Philippines and Malaysia. In your monitoring, during your monitoring of projects, is there an increasing number of projects financed by international financing institutions like the World Bank, ADB? Maybe Mr. Lee can answer this first. How does it look like in Malaysia?
Yeah, hello. In Malaysia, I think they are now practicing a joint venture business. For instance, the one in Joram. China, Western power is coming in, and they are capable to financing the whole project. So it's something like the Silk and Belt mechanism. You see, when they kick off with the project, now unlike previously when they want to start a project near to my housing area, our local people all stand up and objections. But then now they do it more smarter way. They build the incinerators, the monsters, at the site of a dumping ground, which is like landfill and so on. According to the people, let's say if it's a normal landfill, it lasts for 7-8 years. Let's say if you can convert it into a WTE as what they address it. You can prolong the lifespan to 20 years and so on. And then these people come in and lobby their business, and they are able to come up with the financing. There's the system like bill, operation and transfer, something like that. Yeah. So when the people and the local people don't have to come up with the money, and the government for the time being, they don't need to pay it for the time being. So they just penetrated in and start building one by one. And now they do it at the landfill itself, where they are residential distancing away, where the objections of this is not so obvious. You see, we are the people's activists working towards a green environment. When we approach the local people, their thinking is that is far apart, and I won't see it by my own eye. It is safe, and they don't see any impact. But people like us, we are concerning. We need local people to stand with us. When the local people are not, they don't show any interest on it, then we will be like, they work very hard on this aspect. Government also, they smart, they do it with the foreign people, they joint venture, and then later on, I think when you see the impact, then we will know what will happen. Because currently in Malaysia, they are building 4 to 5 projects. It's ongoing. Yeah, we will see what will happen. We try to work hand in hand with the local people, work with our resident associations and so on. But sometimes when this construction is not at your backyard, they are not so interested, and they are not so much concerned. This is the dilemma in Malaysia, and the Malaysia governments are keen to pro this sort of a project where we have a very limited power to object. I look at Land Place in Philippines. You have a very strong organization. You are able to combine up with numerous associations and these organized NGOs. I really salute and respect you. In Malaysia, you can hardly do that because most of us, we are looking for our rice bowl, earning for a living, and then people will come to maybe listen to you. Also, they give you a little bit of time. They can't spend too much time on these sort of things, and government don't bother. They just bulldoze through. Yeah, this is my the difficulties in so-called the third world country, where the ruling government is so powerful, they can easily put it through. Yeah, even with the local concerns, they will build another different way of dramatic things lah. Let's say this opposition party, you don't pro my project, they will look for another group of people where they come in for the food and so on, and they will just bulldoze and put it through. This is so-called local culture. We really fight this one very. It's a cause for us to go against this sort of culture, but I think we still need to struggle with that. Yeah, this is Malaysia side. I pass it to Glenn. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Lee, for the compliment. But while it may sound or look good, with respect to our ongoing campaign against incineration, but believe me, it's very hard and very difficult in this situation because the lobbies are very strong, and they have managed to coalesce, like what we are doing. The business sector, the legislators, and even government executive officials are coalescing and having this sort of alliance. In terms of the financing, there's ADB is one of the very vocal in terms of supporting this project financially. And we don't see yet other financing institutions that does like that. Because what's happening right now, if there is a proponent approaching local government units or the national government, they also bring in together with them investors or one that will finance their WT operations. Some they also include that in the package. They themselves, the WT operators, will finance. But in terms of other financing institutions like local banks or other development banks, we have yet to see. I think they are on the wait and see mode right now, waiting for this law to be passed by our Congress. So that's it.
Okay. It seems that people are having hard time to understand that the impact of incineration is not direct, it's not visual. We know that it's intergenerational. So when you build it now, the impact will be maybe after you have your second or third children or grandchildren, and that sounds really difficult for even decision makers to see the impact or the true cost of incineration. So I also learned from Mr. Lee that democratic spaces from different countries are different, and how the governance system have different system to accommodate the citizen to raise their voices. So that's also another point that really strengthen that we have different fights with different faces, but we are going towards the same way. We are going towards your ways. So glad to hear that from both of you. So Marty, I have a question for you now from Georgina Lamare. Pardon if I pronounce it wrong. So what strategy did you implement to mobilize community participation and public awareness to support your idea of no to WTE? Marty?
I guess, Yoba, like anywhere on the planet, social media, using local connections, local town hall meetings, website, media releases. So we put out media releases to all the large and small media companies. So our national radio station, newspapers, and I guess that's for us getting it out in the media is one way for the average person to hear it on the radio or read about it in the newspaper and gain a bit of understanding. So yeah, you just using all those channels, using media releases, using good communications. We've got a really good communication staff that can pump out the media releases quickly and accurately. And again, through all of our networks and different channels, because we're, the Zero Waste Network, we have about 100 members in the country, and those members have all their own websites, social media pages, Facebook pages. So I guess that's probably the way that we've gone about doing it.
Okay, so maybe on that, Marty, this is a question for all of you, from me actually. How does COVID affected your campaign? I mean, you said, Marty, you're going digital, but I believe for most of us, digital spaces are new, or maybe a bit difficult, especially when you want to approach government to give your opinion and your recommendation on their policy. So maybe I will start with Mr. Lee. How does COVID impact your campaign on incineration?
The question again, please.
So how does COVID-19, the pandemic, impact your work, especially on the terms of campaigning? Especially you mentioned that you work, you try to influence the government. So does this mean that COVID makes things more difficult, or what's your experience on that?
Okay, let me share the most recent this Joram's DEIA report. Government is supposed to disclose it earlier, but then finally they come out in digital format, meaning that they put it in the website and then let the public to access. And then it was during MCO, Movement Control Orders period. They set up a time frame for you. We voice up to the authority. We said, okay, look, it is too short, and then there are people who are not able to access within this such a short period of time. And then we ask for the extension of time. We write in email from our NGOs, and in fact, the Penang Association, Penang Consumer Associations, Nagis, also they also voice up the same thing, but somehow they do not bother. The deadline is still set within that. I think they came out something like end of March, and then the closing date is on the June of the 2nd. We actually requested to prolong for another 30 days or so, because it was during MCO period. Somehow it was not, it was just take under considerations. But within that deadline, our memorandum came in because we got to voice out what are the things we need, need this authority to improve, and then what are the flaws where we find out, and then what kind of methodology they find out, and so on. That's why we have 2 sets of this memorandum handed in by email to the person in charge. I do not know how they're going to handle with these sort of things. Look at it, the project is still going on. This is for Jeram project. This Jeram project was this is a Selangor state government's Wawasan Holding joint ventures with the Western powers, Western China powers. It's a joint venture project which built in Jeram sanitary landfill, where this oppose from the locals was not strong. We in fact work on it, but the response from the local peoples was very poor. Look at it, the impact for this pandemic. In fact, today will be the last day of this recovering MCO. From tomorrow on, there will be from 14 to 27. This is another conditional MCO where our numbers of cases has come out in Wilayah Persekutuan and Selangor and Sabah. So these are the few places where the political people, I should not call them politicians, because they go for the campaign in order to grab the power. At the end of the day, people are suffering. You see, these are the impact from all this COVID-19, where people only crazy struggle for power, and the human rights and the human good being, our Malaysians' good being were put aside. You can see, in fact, from the young people to the senior citizens, from the students, the school need to be closed down due to this impact. Yeah. So tomorrow on will be another 2 more weeks holidays for our Wilayah people and Selangor folks. You see, these are the impact. Really, in another view, these business sectors also will be highly impacted because a lot of restrictions. You may only open your essential shops when your goods are classified essentials. Yeah. If restaurants, they are only open up to 6 a.m. From 6 a.m. up to 6 p.m. only 12 hours. Meaning the night, the dinner you can only take away. You are not able to open your shop and run business and so on. These are all the impacts. Yeah, I pass it over. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Marty, do you want to give your answers?
Would you rephrase your question, please?
Okay, so how does COVID-19, the pandemic, impact your campaign work on anti-incineration? Does it make things more difficult or maybe make things more easy? In your experience, which part is it?
I think, Yovel, more difficult because with COVID-19, a lot of the municipal recycling that was collected ended up getting dumped because they were worried about contamination, and they were worried, the local councils and the waste companies and the recycling companies that would pick up the recycling and put it through materials recovery facilities did not want to touch that material. They did not want to handle that material. So COVID-19 saw a lot of potentially recyclable items that were already collected from curbside recycling bins and commercial recycling bins ending up at materials recovery facilities or MRFs. And instead of going up the sort line, sorted and baled, it went to landfill. And again, that plays into the hands of the waste incineration argument is when we send more of this material to landfill, more plastic to landfill, a lot of people say, well, why don't we just burn it and create energy? Wouldn't that be wonderful? And I mean, that's the whole purpose that we're trying to get people to understand, is that if we don't fix the front end, if we don't stop the flow of all of this packaging and plastic at the front end, we will never solve the problem. And building a monster that needs to be fed for 25 or 30 years will never stop the petrochemical industry from producing more plastic and putting it on supermarket shelves. So COVID-19 certainly, I would say, has set things back slightly. But yeah, for the most part, you can still campaign, you can still use social media, people still listen to the radio, people still read the newspaper, so you can still actively campaign, but it's tough when a lot of that material ended up in landfill due to the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Marty. I think that's answer partially question from Sonia Mendoza. Okay, Glenn, maybe you want to add a bit?
Yeah, very short, no? It helped, the COVID situation helped in some aspect, and it also made it difficult from to other aspect. It helped us because we can do as many meetings as we can with different organizations, and I think some organizations, some networks find it also convenient to attend the meeting online rather than going from one place to another. So that's one help. But on the other hand, it made us difficult to engage our government institutions and policymakers, because we are now reduced to engagement via online, whereas before we are much stronger doing both the offline and online engagement. And lastly, proponents of these incinerators have capitalized on and taking advantage of the situation, because they are now using this situation as therefore necessary for us to adopt this technology of incinerating waste. Otherwise, COVID-19 could be much worse if not, if we are not using this type of technology to dispose our healthcare waste. So it's a mix. It's helped on one point, and it doesn't help in another point. That's it.
Yeah, I see that this is actually an opportunity to raise another issue of just recovery and social justice aside from the technological side of incineration. So that's really great to hear from all of you. Yes, we have a lot of problems, but we always have problems when we challenge this incinerator. So maybe what's the difference? But I believe that we can have a good opportunity during all these difficult conditions to win incinerator fights. I see that we are almost at time. So I'd like to have each of you to give one last maybe message for all the participants who is now joining us live, or maybe we'll watch the recording later. Maybe we can start with Mr. Lee, a short one, like your messages for those who are fighting incineration in their own country.
Oh, okay. I wish my politicians can step up to lead the people, to lead the resident associations, NGOs, and so on. Likewise, the Bandung mayor did that many years ago. Once you step out of you step out the footsteps, the RA and the NGOs will follow. It will be much more easier for us to push, because as NGOs, we don't have much materials and resources. We face a lot of difficulties. When government sectors work hand in hand with the NGOs, it will very much easy for us to work it on. Yeah, that's my wish. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Marty?
Just a few actions, or 2 minutes, Yobel. First of all, we're going circular. The whole world's supposed to be working on a circular economy. Incinerators do not support this. Incinerators pollute the air. I don't care how clean the scrub airs are, or what the latest technology is. It's like putting fresh air out into the atmosphere. No, incinerators pollute our air. They pollute our land. Up to 25% of the waste still has to be buried in form of ash. Incinerators pollute our fresh water and our marine environments. They release greenhouse gases. They are inefficient at producing energy. kilogram for kilogram, about a third as efficient as a coal-fired power station, which hopefully nobody's building. Incinerators destroy valuable resources. Incinerators destroy jobs. There are far more jobs created through reuse recycling than there are through incineration. And lastly, incinerators destroy our zero waste efforts. And remember, zero waste is a goal. It's like zero accidents, zero emissions. Zero waste is a policy driver. It's a goal. If we only get to 98%, we haven't failed. Thanks, Yovel.
That's a great message, Marty. I believe that.
Think if I could, just one last thing, Yovel.
Sure, Marty.
A very famous Canadian said it, so these are not my words. If we can't reuse it, if we can't recycle it, and if we can't compost it, we simply shouldn't be making it. Thank you.
Cool, great. Yeah, love that. Glenn, you want to add your message?
Yes, let's continue this kind of sharing, especially on our, what we know and what we do not know about the ill effects of waste incineration. And also let's share and capacitate one another on how to introduce or implement the real solution, which is the zero waste approach to managing waste. And lastly, to other friends and allies in other countries, especially those that being used as showcase in our countries, please tell your government not to allow WTE proponents to come into our country. So thank you. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Glenn, Mr. Lee, and Marty, for your time and precious insight. I personally learned a lot from your presentation and your sharing. I believe this webinar, this participant in the webinar feel the same way as well. So thank you for all who's joining us today. Thank you for Sonia, Tris, and Miko that helps behind the scene with tech support and all the prep work. And one announcement, aside from the nugget we get today, Gaya Asia Pacific is releasing a 4-member only document called the Anti-Incineration Narrative Toolkit. It is basically a living document that contains a collection of anti-incineration key messages that are accompanied with facts and designed so it can be easily adapted and replicated for local fight context. We hope this toolkit will help members to speed up the process of winning these firefights across the region. And also one more announcement, we have another Learn by the Nuggets. The closest one, or the next one, is in 2 weeks from now on October 27. We will hold another webinar on World Cities Day with the theme of single-use plastic ban, better cities. Don't forget to visit our websites at noburn.org and our microsite zerowasteworld.org, and check our social media page Gaya Asia Pacific on Facebook and Zero Waste Asia on IG and Twitter. We're also present in other social media platforms, and yeah, it will be posted on the site there by Trish. So I hope you have fun listening to these experiences, and let's engage more, maybe on mailing lists or maybe on participating. Thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.